Hey guys, it's Pelican here and welcome to my Stamina DK PvP build for the Elsweyr patch. stamdk has received a lot of improvements this patch and is currently one of the best, if not the best class for solo PvP, which is why I've been playing this instead of my max sword. This build has a lot of healing and damage when you are outnumbered, and it also has a lot of sustain, and it's almost impossible to kill without at least a few people. In this video, I'll be going through my stats, my abilities, my CP, as well as any other changes you can make to this build. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So firstly, I'll be going through my gear setup. I'm running a pretty standard setup, which is 2-piece bloodspawn, 5-piece legion, and 5-piece fury. This setup is still the best in my opinion for solo PvP because it gives you the most damage and defense combined. Legion will have a chance of giving you 500 weapon damage as well as a small heal upon taking damage. And when you are outnumbered, this will have a very high uptime. Fury also works kind of the same way as Legion. You can build up to 750 weapon damage, and it procs whenever you take crit damage. When you are outnumbered and taking a lot of damage, this will build up to max very quickly and it will stay at max. Bloodspawn is one of the best monster sets for solo PvP, and is especially good for Dragonknights because it synergizes well with the DK's battle roar passive. It also gives you a lot of resistance and some stam recovery, and this will also have a very high uptime when you're outnumbered. Now for my armor traits, I run all impen, including my shield, and for the enchantments I run a big piece prismatic, a small piece prismatic, and for the rest I run max stamina, including on my shield. For the jewellery traits I run 1 protective and 2 infused, and for the enchantments I run a weapon damage on the protective, infused weapon damage, and infused cost reduction. You can change protective for another infused for more damage. I don't think having this protective trait is necessary. And if you feel that you are lacking some stam sustain, you can try swapping this enchantment out for another cost reduction. I don't recommend stam recovery over cost reduction on a heavy stam DK because it doesn't have a lot of passives to support it. For my weapon traits, I run both Nirnhoned, and on my sword and board I run a double thought poison because enchantments are cut in half on sword and board, but poisons are not. You can also run other types of poisons such as defile poisons or immovability poisons. And on my back bar I run a weapon damage enchantment. If you feel that you are lacking some stam sustain, you can also run a absorb stam enchantment. Also, if you are playing in non-CP modes, I highly recommend swapping out Fury for Veiled Inheritance because you take less crit damage in non-CP, so your Fury won't proc as much. Also, I recommend running at least one more infused cost reduction glyph because you will seriously lack sustain in non-CP, and you can even run all cost reduction glyphs. Losing a bit of damage won't really matter because everyone dies a lot easier in non-CP. Veiled Inheritance doesn't give as much damage as Legion or Fury, but you have a almost 100% uptime, since your spike armor damage return will proc it a lot. The physical resistance it gives is also very good because it complements the spell resistance that DK gets. Next up, I'll be going through the abilities that I run. On my sword and board bar, I run Meditate, Reverb Bash, Heroic Slash, Vigor, Frag Shield, and Spell Wall. Meditate is an extremely good skill for stamdk in open world PvP because it gives you a ton of sustain as well as a lot of defense, and is completely free to cast. While channeling, it gives you about 2k stam and magicka back every second, and it also heals you and gives you major protection. On top of that, it also gives you a block passive which complements us really well since we have it on our sword and board bar where we will block a lot. Next up is Reverb Bash. This will be our main stun, and it also applies major defile, which is very useful for killing tanky targets that have a lot of healing. Heroic Slash will be our main spammable. It does a good amount of damage, and it also maims and snares the opponent. On top of that, it also gives you ultimate regen, which complements us really well since ultimate is very important for a Dragonknight. Vigor will be our main heal. On this setup, we have a lot of healing, and when fully buffed, the Vigor tooltip can reach as high as 23,000. Major Mending will give us extra healing on top of Vigor. It increases all healing done by 25%. This includes things like the 7th Legion proc, and it also procs the Mountain's Blessing passive, which gives us 10% weapon damage and more ultimate recovery. Lastly, for my ultimate, I'm running Spell Wall. This is a very good defensive ultimate, and it's very good for kiting as well, since it will reflect all projectiles cast at you. And as mentioned before, it goes really well with Meditate. On my 2-hand bar, I'm running Hardened Armour, Noxious Breath, Forward Momentum, Cauterize, Executioner, and for the ultimate, I run either Corrosive Armor or Take Flight. Hardened Armour will be our main defensive skill. It will give you your physical and spell resistance as well as 12% more healing. So you will want this skill up at all times. And it also returns some damage to enemies that attack you. Both morphs of this ability is very good. And I'm using the morph that gives me an additional damage shield because I prefer more defense. But the other morph is very good as well because you can use it to pull Nightblades out of cloak, and I will highly recommend the other morph as well if you are using Veiled Inheritance because it will just make it proc even more. Noxious Breath will be our damage over time skill as well as debuff. It does a fair bit amount of damage on cast as well as over time, and it's also a relatively cheap skill, and it will apply Major Fracture to our enemies, which will greatly increase your damage dealt to them. Noxious Breath has received a significant buff to its initial damage this patch, and as you can see, the damage is not far behind our main spammable, so if you want, you can actually use this as a spammable, and I especially like using it as a spammable on Nightblades that keep entering stealth. Forward Momentum will give us our weapon damage as well as remove snares. It also has a pretty good heal over time. Now many people tend to underestimate this heal over time. I checked all my fights. Forward Momentum contributes about 20% of my total healing in the fight. I won't recommend running Rally over this in open world because it's more expensive, and since you already have so much healing, having Rally is kind of unnecessary, and having a snare remover is more important. Next up is Cauterize. Now Cauterize is extremely broken this patch because it basically heals as much as Rally now, and it does that every 5 seconds including on cast. On top of that, it's a very cheap ability. It only costs about 2k magicka, and I have Cauterize hit me for as high as 10k healings. So this is a very good skill. It will greatly increase your healing and survivability, and I highly recommend running it on any setup. Executioner, this will be our execute. When your opponent's HP is low, it will hit a lot harder than Heroic Slash. So it's very good for taking down tanky targets that are in low health. Also, killing enemies on your 2-hand bar is good because it will proc the Battle Rush passive, which will give you some sustain back. I don't use the AoE morph because stamdk is primarily a single target class. Lastly, for my ultimates, the first ultimate that I use is Corrosive. Corrosive is one of the best ultimates in the game. It is both a defensive and offensive ultimate, and it also received a slight duration buff this patch. When Corrosive is active, all damage you take except Oblivion damage is limited to 3% of your max health, making you nearly unkillable while this is active. On top of that, all of your attacks also ignore enemy physical resistance, which is extremely useful for killing any type of targets, but especially tanky targets with a lot of resistance. When Corrosive is up, there's almost no enemy in Cyrodiil that you can't kill. The other ultimate that I like to use is Take Flight. Take Flight is a very powerful burst ultimate. It does more burst than Dawnbreaker, costs less, and it also almost never misses. My tooltip for this fully buff is about 25k, which is high enough to one-shot most squishy players. On top of that, it also has a 28 meter range, which makes it ideal to use as a gap closer. Due to both its high damage and range, this is the perfect counter to squishy builds that like to stay far away from you, such as snipe spammers. Previously, this skill wasn't very good because it missed a lot, but ever since they increased its radius from 6.5 to 8 meters in the Elsweyr patch, it now almost never misses and is back to being a very strong ultimate. One other ultimate that you can consider is Berserker Rage. This ultimate hits even harder than Take Flight, but it's not an AoE and it doesn't have range. It also doesn't stun, so you have to use your reverb before using this ultimate. But the good thing about this ultimate is that not only does it do a lot more damage, it also gives you some defense as well as immovability. So this is another ultimate that you can consider over Take Flight and Corrosive. Other than that, for my attributes, I run all points into stamina. And for my Mundus, I run the warriors for more weapon damage. And for my food, I run the purple tri-step food. The reason I don't run dubious is because I feel that stamina recovery isn't the best way to get sustain on a heavy stamdk. And on top of that, dubious also got a nerf this patch, so it isn't as viable anymore. Also, I feel that the max magicka that tri-step food gives complements stamdk really well due to how stamdk gets its magicka back. For example, if I were to pop corrosive armor, that will give me about 9.2k magicka, and if I'm not running tri-step food, I would have too little magicka for this return to be effective. For my potions, I'm running the ones that give me stamina, crit, and immovability. Having crit from the potion is very helpful because heavy stamdk has very low crit, which can be a bit annoying, and immovability will help me with my defense and is also very good for going on offense. And as mentioned before, it goes really well with the meditate skill. You can also run lingering health potions. Lingering health is probably the best potion effect to run on a heavy stamdk, but unfortunately, the good potions that have lingering health are very expensive. If you have a lot of gold, you can try making those new potions that give you health, stamina, and lingering effect. For my race, I'm a Redguard. Now I think that there's absolutely no reason not to go Redguard on a stamdk because its passive just complements the class so well. The Adrenaline Rush passive gives you a ton of sustain without failure. This passive procs whenever you deal direct damage, and this includes damage that is reflected to your enemy due to the Spike Armor ability. So effectively, you are getting stam back not only when you deal direct damage, but also when you take direct damage. This will effectively make this ability proc every 5 seconds. Also, unlike stamina recovery, this ability will still give you back your stamina even when you are performing actions such as blocking or sprinting. Redguard also gives you 2000 max stam, which will increase your damage, your healing, and your sustain. And it also reduces the cost of all weapon abilities, including ultimates, by 8%. And this is very useful because we are using 5 weapon abilities, and some of them are expensive, such as Reverberating Bash. Now, one note to make: when the cost of the ultimate is reduced, you will still get back the original amount of resources from the Battle Roar passive. Meaning that if I were to cast Spell Wall, the Battle Roar passive would treat the ultimate as if it has 135, as if it costs 135 ultimate and not 125. So this passive will not reduce the amount of sustain that you get back from this passive. Other than that, make sure to have your Undaunted passive. And for my armor setup, I'm running 6 heavy and 1 medium. You can also go 7 heavy if you want, but I prefer 6 heavy and 1 medium. Last but not least, I'll be going through my CP setup. Remember that this is just my setup and you can change it to better suit your playstyle. On the blue tree, I'm running 49 into Blessed, 3 physical weapon expert, 72 master at arms, 66 precise, 31 piercing, and 49 mighty. For my raid 3, I'm running 66 ironclad, 54 resistant, 37 hardy and ally, and 56 thick skin, 9 expert defender, and 11 quick recovery. For my green CP, I'm running 56 into warlock and 21 into sprinter. I run 1 point into siphoner to give 10 plus more effects to purge. And I run 16 bashing focus because I like to weave bash between my attack for more damage. 7 into arcanist, 37 into tenacity. I don't run mooncalf because I have very low stam recovery. 66 into tumbling and 66 into shadow wall. You can put some points into Befouler if you feel like you need more healing reduction on your enemies. So that's all for the build video. Stamdk has been really fun for me this patch, and I hope you enjoy this setup as much as I do. Do let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.